think it's quite interesting to create a sound palette when you start a project. And sometimes new sounds, I troll the internet for plugins. Like every month I'm going to go and look at the plugins, especially the free ones. And I'm going to spend an afternoon trying them out.
Well, that's
making
good.
notes of all the kind of presets that I like, creating new presets. Getting rid of the ones I don't like, so that because sometimes it's just that new sound that's going to inspire you to create something new. So I do that regularly.
That's cool.
It's just like
that's quite dedicated, quite disciplined thing to do.
It's just it's fun. It's just one of my favorite things. It's just like, what does it do? Oh, if I move it, and it's completely not. It's literally just playing with the plugin and seeing what it does. I find it really enjoyable, so it's not really disciplined.
Welcome to the 8th and final episode of Excuse the Mess Series 1, a music podcast hosted and created by me, Ben Corrigan. I was very lucky to be joined by the composer, pianist, electronic musician and producer Emilie Levienaise-Farrouch, who writes really amazing music that centres around a core piano sound and expands sonically into sound design, electronics, beautiful string writing, field recordings, and often cinematic sounds. As always, you can hear lots of examples of the guest's music throughout the podcast. In particular, lots of cool music from her second album, Époques, which was released on FatCat Records in July this year. And actually, Époques, the title track from the album, is playing underneath. We'll delve a little bit into how she made the music for that album, the process behind it, and her 2-week retreat that she went on to Oldborough to get away from the city and to focus on writing. She recently finished work on a collaboration with the visual artist Alice May Williams. The piece they made was By Accident of Your Birth, which is part of a wider exhibition at Knoll called A Woman's Place. Emilie describes the music she's written for this as Baroque techno, so you'll get to hear a bit of what that sounds like later. We talk a bit about the exciting things happening in film music at the moment. Emilie has written 3 feature film scores. One of those films will be out this year and it's called Only You. Aside from film music and being a solo artist, Emilie also gets commissions from amazing ensembles like the London Contemporary Orchestra. They commissioned her to write a piece for their late-night BBC Proms last year, and you'll hear a little bit of that during the episode. We also talk about 2 dominating conversations here in Britain, the weather and Brexit. I've decided to split this episode into the conversation part, which is part A, and then the music making part B. That's the section of the podcast where myself and the guest attempt to co-compose a piece of music on the same day using only one instrument and electronic manipulations of it. So for this episode, we're using a piano. So definitely go and check out part B when you're done here. And just before we get to the episode, I need to say a huge thank you to the podcast supporters and funders, Arts Council England, PRS Foundation, and the Noted Fellowship for making this whole series happen. Right, on with the last episode of the series, featuring Emilie Levienaise-Farrouch. So you came to London about 10 years ago, is that right? 12 years ago.
Yeah.
To do an undergrad and then a master's,
yes.
Right? Goldsmiths.
I did master at Goldsmiths and BA at Westminster. Basically, again, because I've been here for so long, I have no idea if that's still relevant, but at the time in France, studying music was either conservatoire, so classical music, or IRCAM. So incredible, but also very avant-garde. There wasn't that many. You couldn't go to a university to learn how to use a recording studio, how a microphone works and stuff like that. And that was something that fascinated me. So London felt like well, you could go to Paris, but you had to go to private schools, not public universities.
So would you have preferred to stay in France, or did you just like the idea of moving?
No, because it would have been pretty much the same, like financially speaking, to go to Paris, but I decided to come to London because, well, just living abroad is a good experience. Like, it's an interesting thing to do.
You're still here?
As well. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Once you've done an MA and you start doing your first few jobs somewhere, and all your friends and network is in place, it's kind of good to live.
So you're stuck here. You're stuck on Brexit Island. Well done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we'll see how that.
Don't worry, it's all going to be great. It's going to be fine.
Well, it has to get moving at some point.
At some point.
One direction or another. It's time to start working on it, either cancelling the whole thing or tackling it. But
they're not making much headway, are they?
No, but I think it's starting to be very frustrating from people from mainland Europe because the uncertainty is not very great for the economy of everyone else. So. You're not making friends by waiting around like that.
It's not my fault.
Is it not?
He tried to blame me personally for.
As a British person, so.
I voted. I managed to change a couple of people's minds.
That's fine. I was going to say, did you call your nan? Did you call your grandparents? Did you try to convince them to do the right thing?
I did, yeah.
Okay, that's
I
good.
did. There's not much else I can do apart from follow them into the booth or dress up as them.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, actually.
Next time, if they do a round two.
Can't believe you're blaming me for Brexit.
Well, you know, you're British.
But I'm not Britain. Yeah. No, it does suck.
I'm British, but I'm not Britain. That's a good t-shirt, though.
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah. Great. Let's just spend the rest of the afternoon printing t-shirts. That's good.
I guess that's what's really bizarre when you go to an area where like Cornwall, where actually there's not that much immigration and there's a lot of EU-funded infrastructures.
Yeah.
So you're actually winning quite a lot from that situation. So why do you not want that for yourself anymore?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's very naive to believe people who've been consistently making cuts at every given opportunity and just believe that suddenly they will stop that kind of attitude, because it's important to realize that these cuts are coming into effect because certain people don't believe in the need for public services, and it's nothing to do with Europe. It's just that they don't believe that if you haven't worked for it, you shouldn't get anything, even though they don't realize that actually most of what they have is because of who they are and what their parents have achieved, and not just that's another subject.
Well, that's Brexit covered, and later we'll sort out gender inequality in music. For now, you're listening to Ultramarine from Emilie's latest album. As part of the album making process, Emilie was invited by the Brit & Spears Foundation to go on a 2-week composers retreat in order to focus on the writing. You had 2 weeks in Aldborough?
Yeah.
So that was a sort of a residency, composer residency.
Yeah, basically it's Imogen Holst, Bangalore. Do you know? I don't know if you know who she is.
Was she a composer as well?
I don't actually know. I think she was very involved with music. I think I started her biography when I was there. I didn't finish.
Sure.
But she was very musical, and she was Gustav Holst's daughter, and she worked with Benjamin Britten for years. She was definitely a pianist because her piano is still in the property in a really funny little music room where everything is covered in cork. And the floor is covered, and there's just lots of
Is that an acoustic thing, or does she just love cork?
I think so.
Right.
I think so, because No, actually all the tiling in the house is original and everything, and a lot of the tiling is cork as well.
Yeah.
Just that I'd never seen that before. But yeah, it was, so they organised that composers retreat, which is great because there's no strings attached. You literally can go for a week to a month and you're not really expected to deliver anything. And then you just have one bedroom, one lounge, and a little tiny music room.
Any Wi-Fi?
Yeah, come on, yes, of course.
And you didn't go full retreat then?
No, yeah, I had also some work to do for another composer at some point.
Yeah.
Very intense.
So you were well away from London.
Yes.
And it's coastal town, isn't it? Yeah.
It's coastal, and the time I went as well was, I went at the very end of winter. So it's just the moment where it starts shifting into spring.
Yeah.
So it's still quite like barren and it's not green at all. It's
I'm
just
imagining.
like,
So what I'd imagine is this weather. It's sort of baking hot outside.
No,
now,
it was more like cold and grey. It didn't rain too much, but it was a very grey landscape, a very monochromatic landscape. But you could start seeing like the first violets, the first little blooms, and
Interesting.
you could really sense the kind of shift between winter and the beginning of like this life.
Do you think if you were there in a different season, the album would have been completely different?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
because when you're there at this time of the year, you have to work harder to kind of to appreciate the landscape. You know, when you go to a place, even if you go to Devon or this type of area of England where everything is green and hilly and it's just quite obvious that it's pretty. But in winter on that coast, you kind of have to pay more attention to detail and learn to appreciate it a bit more.
Yeah.
So then you learn to find beauty in things that aren't as approachable and as obviously beautiful.
Yeah.
That definitely affected the record.
Did you grow up in the countryside?
I grew up in Bordeaux.
Okay.
And then spent quite a bit of time in the countryside around that, but that is not at all like England. It's pine forests, sand dunes, Atlantic Ocean with huge waves, really hot in the summer. It smells amazing.
It smells amazing.
Yeah, the stones in Bordeaux are like golden. It's just it's gloriously beautiful. There's vineyards everywhere, little castles everywhere.
That sounds
it's great.
Dreamy.
It's really
Do you like going back?
I like going back. I don't go back that often though, because I just don't have time.
Go back for the smells. What's your favourite smell?
Not in the city, but in the countryside, as if you go in the summer, because there's pine forest all around the coast from Bordeaux to the Basque Country. It's just they're not all forests. They're man-made. I think they're like 18th century or something. And you have all those pines that get really heated up, so you have all the smell of the sap. And the cork and the needles that get really, really, really intense. And that smells amazing. But even in London, there's some really great smells.
Yeah, I've got a really nice basil plant at home.
There's a lot
I just
of them.
stroke it a bit and then walk around sniffing my hand. So, anyways, I really tangented us there. So the theme of Époques. Say it in your French accent, please. Époque, thank you. That's the correct pronunciation. Your second album, and so you went for this residency retreat thing. And the themes of the album are.
I find it really difficult to explain music in words because if I could say it in words, I wouldn't use music to say it. So aspects I was thinking about or that were on my mind when I was writing it, but albums that don't necessarily come from a conceptual point of view. Concert music, yes, or like when I work with a visual artist, yes, but album it's more improvising or just something I like the sound of and I'm going to use that as a starting point. And our relationship with nature was interesting. It's just this kind of, because we're all at the same time extremely inspired by nature. Artists have been inspired by nature from the very first art. And one of the first drawing was like animals and things like that. But at the same time, we're both scared of nature. Like, we find the force of nature really scary, and at the same time, we also really despise it. Where we feel really above it and really like we can use it and degrade it in any way we feel that we want to. So it's just this kind of that tension like we're not part of nature while we are biologically speaking. It's just that was interesting to me.
Yeah,
especially with all the talk about the Anthropocene and blah 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 last year. So that makes you think a bit.
Yeah.
And then you go into this kind of slightly barren landscape, but it forces you on your own, where actually your only form of interaction is with nature, not with other human beings. So that was, it was. I think you can. A lot of people have said they feel like the word threat have come up a lot regarding the record, because I think there is this sense of like something slightly negative in the background.
This is The Only Water, and if you listen carefully you can hear some very distant ghostly vocals in there. Here's Emilie explaining an interesting process she went through in order to make those sounds.
There's quite a bit of voice in there. There's a recording of me singing something that then I played back on the beach, and I played it back as well in the reeds field, re-recorded it from quite far, so you have like the real reverb of the landscape, and chopped it up. And like mixed it in different order, passed it through filter to create this kind of, creates like a train sound with a weird ghost-like voice.
The process of the writing, I was curious to know what sort of comes first. Is there a pattern to how you write it? Do you start at the piano?
I will always, for albums, at the piano, definitely. Or if I can get my hand on an instrument I can't play really, but I will try to. Like,
that's an interesting one.
I had access to an electric bass, and I was trying to find harmonic notes, just to try to see if I could get multiphonics out of the electric bass, which you can. It's actually pretty easy, even if you can't play at all. So that was also a starting point sometimes. It's just finding sounds or melody that I like through improvisation. As a starting point. Once I have the kind of starting melody or harmonic structure or whatever, then I can start figuring out in my head what would work with it. So it's the starting point is the piano, but then really quickly I just imagine what type of sound I would think would work with it.
And you do a lot of sort of sound design things with acoustic instruments or field recordings and like this?
Yeah, I'm a bit weird with that. I tend to prefer, even though the end result is going to sound just like if I'd use a synthesizer, I do like starting with an acoustic element more and manipulating it.
I'm quite similar actually as well. I think the results are always just that bit better if you use it using audio.
At the end of the day, as long as you as the music maker enjoy doing it that way, that's enough. You don't necessarily need to justify it further. If that's your process, that's your process.
You're gigging it now, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you've got a gig coming up at the Union Chapel, like Daylight Music.
Yes,
that thing.
Which is going to be my third Daylight Music, I think.
Oh really? Okay.
It's a really good gig.
Yeah, it's a good gig.
We're doing a tiny little tour with other people from my label, like that date and a Brighton date that has been announced, and then there's a few more that are about to be confirmed. And then I might do a few France shows as well. I have one in a museum in Brittany, which I'm really excited to, in the middle of like beautiful paintings. I'm really looking forward to that one as well.
So is this like, are you going to be doing a lot more of playing live? You've got 2 albums to
that, and also I'm starting, because once you I started playing live, I started looking at other people's performances in a different way and really starting to understand how that's an art form in itself.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of opportunities. So I'm really hoping that in the next few years I'll be able to kind of create
Anyone in
something
particular that's kind of given you some ideas?
Well, you're going to be lucky when you come to Union Chapel because you're going to see my someone who's on the same label as me, and she's called Rosina, and she's a cellist, and she's really great to see there. She has like it's just her and the cello, and they do projection as well. But yeah, she just has a way to integrate electronic and acoustic instruments that's really cool.
Okay, yeah. And I guess that's what you are doing as well.
Yeah.
The technology side of things isn't always sort of a battle, for me anyway.
No, it is. It is.
Always a battle, and like something that worked perfectly in soundcheck, you'll go there to try and start your first number.
After the very last gig on Sunday, the computer crashed just after we finished. I was just so thankful. Like, oh, thank God it didn't happen during the show. But I don't know, we'll see how it goes. I really hope I can develop it in the next few years. But there's just so much to think about, because now it's another area of my practice that I want to develop at the same time as becoming a better producer and becoming a better composer.
This one's called Overflow, and it features Robert Ames on viola and Brian O'Kane on cello. We're going to jump into a women in music conversation now, and actually earlier today, before I started recording this voiceover, I stumbled across some alarming stats on SmirnoffEqualizingMusic.com. 17% of 2016 headliners at international music festivals for women, 5% of recognised producers are women, 3 solo women have won the Mercury Prize Award in its 22-year history, and 17% of Performing Rights Society members are women. Just let that soak in for a second. That's an insane imbalance. Obviously lots more work to be done in those areas, so I guess good on you, Smirnoff, for running a campaign that promotes women in music, I think specifically electronic music. Anyways, back to the chat.
I think there is a lot of female producers who produce their own work. There's not that many technicians who are female, and there's not that many, don't know that many women who are producers for other people's projects, if you know what I mean. I think that's still the kind of areas where this need to be some changes. It was interesting actually because I went to a recording session for a film composer who I did some music sound design on her piano sound for a Netflix thing, and I went
Carly Paradis is the composer.
And I went to the recording session for that, and it was extraordinary because every person it was an air studio, and everyone in the room, well, not the musicians, the only guys in the room were the musicians, everyone else was women, like producer, composer, everyone, and I've never seen that. Never seen that in my life. That was really incredible. And I think the weirdest situation I've had was in LA a few years back, going to like a dinner or something, and all the guys were asking each other what they were doing, and at some point I made eye contact with another girl who was there, and they didn't ask us what we were doing in life. Like they just didn't really think maybe they're doing something interesting, which was very strange because they were all surfing and doing yoga and being so like open-minded, but at the same time it didn't really occur to them, and that was very strange. I was very like, what is going on? Those guys of all people shouldn't be underestimating us.
That's probably what it's even more like upsetting, is when it's the people that are the good guys maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
But the good guys don't care. but they would be upset that they had acted like that, but they don't know,
but that's
which
the thing,
suggests it's so deeply...
I think with all this kind of form of discrimination, there's still like really obvious people who are doing it intentionally, but I think the step we are at now is more bias and things that we don't realize we're doing, and we're all doing it. I genuinely feel like we are getting to that stage where it might be a bit trickier because actually it's not as obvious even to the person doing it.
Yeah.
So it's just something.
It's true. Just fill me with paranoia that I'm doing it without knowing it.
I'm sure I do it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure everyone does it. It's just very complicated when you start having to question the motivation behind everything you think and everything you said.
This is Fracture Points from the new album. It's one of my favourites. Emilie and I are both big fans of the film music scene at the moment, particularly the fact that a lot of artists are being hired to do film scores as opposed to just the usual suspects who churn out like 30 soundtracks a year.
It's people who do film score, but not just film score, like Max Richter or Johan Johansson. Those people, they do various things.
I like the film scene because of exactly that. It's people who do a bit of that and then they go off and like develop their artistic practice in other areas, and then they keep coming in and they're doing a thing. Have you got any films lined up? Because your music...
I do.
You've done some films, I know
yes,
that.
But I've done, this year I've done a film called Only You, which is a first feature by Harry Woodcliffe, and it has Laia Costa from Victoria and Josh O'Connor, who is soon, I guess, going to be known as Josh O'Connor from The Crown.
Right.
And not God's Own Country and other really... They're just really... The chemistry on is really incredible. I'm really looking forward for that to premiere in the festival. And then, but it was really good, and again I think you're right, it's just a different approach that composers have now, where they didn't approach me because they thought that, like you have film composer already technical in a way, so they could score anything and they really understand the kind of strategies to create this or that type of emotion or change of pacing through the score. And then you have a different type of composer who actually have an individual sound, and maybe the range of project they can work on is slightly more limited, but you get approached because they want you to bring your voice to the table, and it was one of the situations where they had heard my music and they wanted something of that sort for the film, which is extremely... It is a lovely way to come on board with the project, because you kind of...
You feel more free, right?
Yeah, you feel like people enjoy what you create, which for
anything
emotionally sensitive artists is always feeling wanted is always very useful.
Oh god, it's great for the ego.
Yeah, exactly. Very ego stroking.
Yeah, and it does seem to be happening. It seems like quite fashionable now that's the way to do it.
But I mean, if you look into it, a lot of the film composers who have disrupted, I hate that word, but who have disrupted the styles were in bands. Danny Elfman or Clint Mansell, they were in band. They had created a sound for themselves, and then they got approached to make film scores, and then those film scores were in every 10 tracks for years because they had been so new and so different. So I think it's always kind of been part of the film scoring history, coming from a non-technical background or from a pop background.
Yes, but I think the difference now is that people would have been like, I'm a film composer, but now it's just I'm a composer.
Yeah, same. Now it's composer, and you don't necessarily have a prefix of like film or classical composer. You are a composer. Kind of is a bit more fluid.
A nice place to be in music, isn't it? I'm just going to pause this conversation there for a second so you can hear a little snippet of the music that Emily and I write together in the second part of this episode.
Working on a film, I loved it. Love working with directors. Love the way working with someone who comes from a visual point of view brings a completely different perspective on the music. And it's just really privileged. Sometimes you just get to ask questions about what are you trying to say, in a sense where you're trying to be like, oh, your film is not communicating very well, but like literally like emotionally, where is it coming from? You get to interview them and ask all the geekiest questions in order to inform what you're going to write, and that's so lucky. That's such a privileged thing to have. So I do want to carry on doing feature films, but again, if I'm lucky enough to carry on working quite closely with directors, that would be great.
Well, your sound lends itself to those interesting film projects.
I hope I get also on projects where I can stray a bit from what I have done, and also people who challenge me. And just feel like, well, we like this tiny little aspect of what you do, could you expand it more? That would be really interesting.
This is Emily's commission from the London Contemporary Orchestra for last year's proms, called The Minutes.
Minutes.
Okay. Apologies.
I
just read it.
I know.
Now that I know it's the minutes, thinking about how it sounds, that makes a lot more sense.
Very conceptual.
Yeah, God. Missed that one, didn't I? recent collaboration of Emilie's was with the visual artist Alice May Williams. She created the music and the sound design for a video installation called By the Accident of Your Birth, which is part of a larger exhibition at Knoll called A Woman's Place. Before you hear Emilie talk about it, here's a little extract of what that sounds like.
There was once a naturalist whose father was the first gynecologist. He said, "There is an extreme difficulty in fixing the boundary which separates the animal from the vegetable kingdom." His friend agreed. Between a protozoan and a mammal is only a succession of intersteps. Nature can evolve an onion into a philosopher or a mollusk into a prime minister. A homosexual is a natural psychological intergrade, just as a hermaphrodite is a natural physical intergrade. If the spectrum is a chain, who is drawing this line through the middle? Who is saying that each specimen must conform to one of two theories or else be thought abnormal? Why not recognise the infinite biological intersteps of male and female, the notes in between A and B, the weeds springing up in the cracks of the borders?
Vita Sackville-West was the only daughter of Lord Sackville-West, but being a daughter, she couldn't inherit the house, and it went to her cousin. So the work looks into the kind of relationship between Vita and Eddie. She was bi and he was gay, so it was quite, and they looked very similar. Yeah, so there's this kind of dual screen installation by Alice. Yeah, it's kind of looking at gender identity and inheritance and the feeling of being home. And then she asked me to create a soundtrack for it and all the sound design. And I went for what could be called baroque techno.
Baroque techno.
Which was very fun. So there was a lot of drums, there was a lot of beats, and there is the Sackville-West organ, which is the oldest playable organ in the UK, which they let me have access to. It's like a chest organ. It's very small, and you have to pump it on the side. It's in tune with itself.
Okay.
Lord Sackville-West probably hated me after a few hours, because I think he said yes, thinking I'm going to have a very capable organist coming and playing beautiful music, and instead he had a French girl coming in and playing one note at a time
to sample the organ
for 2.5 hours. He actually came in after an hour being like, "Are you okay? Do you have everything you need?" Basically, like, "Who are you crazy people?" But then it was the only way to work with it, because it was just so little time, and then once you put it in the SX24 you can actually tune it.
Yeah, sure.
So that you can integrate it with other instruments.
And here's another little extract.
The cousins tried on names like they tried on outfits. The girl was Julian, the dark man, occasionally Mrs. Harold Nicholson. The boy was a musician, a writer, a Lord Sackville. She was a wounded French soldier in a uniform of breeches and pearls. He wore a long velvet cape and a delicately arched brow. The girl eventually took a husband, but not his name. The boy didn't either, but then he didn't take a husband at all. Nobody ever asked. "Is he musical?" the other boys asked of him. "Does she stand on the night train?" the girls asked of her. The girl said, "Nothing is an adventure until it becomes an adventure in the mind. The imaginary is the key to the real." One of the naturalists said, "There exists in nature only individuals. The types, orders, and classes exist only in our imagination. Wanting to judge the whole on the basis of a single part is an error. This way of knowing is not a science, but an arbitrary language out of which no real knowledge can come."
That's it for part A of this episode. Please do go and check out part B, where Emilie and I make a track together using only the piano and electronic manipulations of it. If you don't get around to doing that, then this is the last episode of Series 1, so thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed listening to the whole series. If you haven't checked out all the episodes, then go back. There's 7 more. Please do like, share, subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, leave a rating. All of those things really help. Keep an eye out for Emilie News online. Her Twitter handle is EmilieLF1. She's also on Facebook and Instagram, and that's just her name in one long epic word. The final thing, and as a thank you to Danny Mulhern for letting us use his piano and studio to make the piece of music for this episode, here's a really lovely track of his called Held Together with String to play us out.